A high school boy's daredevil adventure leads him to a cranky old lady who steals his belongings. This is a must-watch explosive new anime for October. The female lead, Momo, is deceived by a scoundrel who swindles her money and body. He demands money or a good time, but Momo responds with a swift sidekick. However, the scoundrel blocks it and kicks her back. Unable to win the fight, he curses and leaves. Despite this, Momo is still heartbroken over the breakup because the scoundrel looks like her idol Ken. Distraught, Momo wanders like a zombie to the protagonist's classroom door. The timid, lonely boy with glasses is bullied, but doesn't fight back. Unable to watch this, Momo sits in front of him to support him. This stops the bullies from throwing paper balls. Momo finds it boring and looks for a place to release stress. Unexpectedly, the boy with glasses follows her and starts a conversation, believing she must like him because of the supernatural magazine in his hands. Convinced of aliens' existence, he annoys Momo, who finds him too chatty. In a few words, she blasts his annoying otaku behavior, telling him that's why he has no friends. This leaves him devastated, making Momo feel guilty, and she goes back to console him. Although she doesn't believe in aliens, she believes in ghosts. The boy laughs at her belief, but Momo tells him her grandmother is a medium who can exorcise spirits. He insists this doesn't prove ghosts exist. Momo challenges him, asking if aliens have ever invited him aboard a UFO. They argue and decide to bet. Momo will visit a rumored UFO hotspot while the boy explores a haunted tunnel. They aim to prove each other's beliefs. The loser must run errands for the winner. That night, Momo goes alone to an abandoned hospital where calling for a UFO on the rooftop supposedly leads to abduction and memory wipe. Meanwhile, the boy visits a creepy tunnel, a famous haunted site according to the internet. As they keep in touch by phone, the boy claims he's not scared, but soon starts screaming upon entering the tunnel. Momo, on her end, hears the boy questioning her belief in ghosts despite never seeing one. Momo shares her story. She was raised by her exorcist grandmother, who required her to perform rituals even on the way to school, leading to mockery from her peers, including the boys she liked. Angry at the rituals, she blamed her grandmother and stopped speaking to her and performing the rituals. However, she later realized her distress was not due to the boy's mockery, but because he ridiculed her grandmother. She loves her grandmother and her unique job as a medium. More than believing in ghosts, she believes because of her grandmother. She then asked Glasses Boy why he believed in the existence of aliens. As they talked and walked, Glasses Boy felt that liking something didn't need a reason. Just then, he spotted blood footprints on the ground that spread up to his feet. Filled with fear, he turned around, and a terrifying face appeared in front of him. The ghostly old lady gave him two choices. Either suck on my persimmon or I'll lick your beef. Terrified, Glasses Boy ran away, but he encountered the high-speed grandma. If caught, he would be cursed. Unfortunately, by the time Momo said this, Glasses Boy had already been caught, and the signal was lost. Worried, Momo rushed to save him, but the next second, three strange humanoid creatures appeared behind her. Ha ha ha! The aliens have come! The three aliens grabbed Momo and violently tore her clothes. When she woke up again, she was tied to a chair. The aliens said they were friendly, but their species only had males, so they could only reproduce through cloning. This method, however, did not allow for biological evolution. To retrieve reproductive skills like humans, the aliens wanted human reproductive organs. They planned to mate first, then take Momo's uterus and genitals for research. Hearing this, Momo was devastated. She hadn't even given her virginity to a scoundrel, let alone be violated by aliens. However, being tied up, she couldn't escape. The aliens could control her brainwaves with psychic powers, igniting her desires. Surprisingly, Momo resisted, but the aliens forcibly spread her legs, and a mechanical bull's part pressed against her. Just then, Momo's phone rang. As an alien picked it up, a red light flashed, and high-speed grandma burst out of the phone. She hit the alien's bull's part, sending him flying. Half of high-speed grandma's body was still Glasses Boy. The two hadn't fully merged, and Glasses Boy was still conscious. The aliens were extremely interested in this phenomenon, a technology they didn't possess. As the primary consciousness turned into high-speed grandma, she came to suck the alien's bull's part. The alien hurriedly tore open his clothes to reveal his true form, telling Glasses Boy to leave unless he handed over his bull's part. High-speed grandma didn't say much and started running, quickly reaching him and performing a German suplex, biting off the alien's bull's part. Another alien was slammed into the wall. Now only one remained, who quickly declared a ceasefire. After all, they had a friendly treaty with humans and only wanted reproductive organs. At this moment, the consciousness switched back to Glasses Boy. Admiring the aliens, he eagerly said, "Take it. Whatever you want, I'll give." He also spoke his true feelings. He had always been friendless, which is why he wanted to find aliens to befriend. He had been calling for UFOs from the rooftop since elementary school, but aliens never came. Glasses Boy was bullied and not recognized by others. However, Momo protected him, so he too wanted to protect Momo. For Momo, he would gladly become a monster. After shouting that, Glasses Boy was completely assimilated by high-speed grandma. Momo couldn't help but cheer for him. But in the next second, an alien blasted the emboldened Glasses Boy. The aliens then labeled them as hostile humans, deciding not to abide by the friendly treaty anymore. Intent on finishing what they had started, Momo fought back hard. Suddenly, she remembered her grandmother's words about the daily rituals that could release energy and block misfortune and illness. Following her grandmother's advice, Momo concentrated her power in her lower abdomen, imagining releasing energy from the top of her head. Unexpectedly, the glass cover and chair binding her shattered from the energy. The alien's psychic power was pushed back too. It turned out that the excessive stimulation of Momo's brainwaves had activated her chakras. Now, with newfound superpowers, Momo unleashed the side-spinning kick she had used on a scoundrel before, a kick even the aliens couldn't withstand. The UFO, disguised as the moon, was utterly destroyed. However, Glasses Boy was still under high-speed grandma's control and attacked Momo again. Momo forcefully expelled the spirit from his body. Although the possession was over, the curse was not lifted because high-speed grandma still held on to Glasses Boy's part. As long as it wasn't recovered, Glasses Boy's curse couldn't be lifted. After saying this, high-speed grandma returned to the tunnel, and the uncontrolled UFO crashed into the abandoned hospital and crash-landed. Glasses Boy finally came to his senses. Now one finally believed in aliens, and the other in ghosts. Glasses Boy could only maintain his sanity because Momo was using her superpowers to suppress the curse. It seemed they had no choice but to defeat high-speed grandma. As Glasses Boy started undressing to go immediately, he let Momo wear his clothes to go home, blaming himself for everything and not wanting to involve Momo anymore. But how could Momo stay out of it? Especially when she needed to help suppress the curse. She picked up the clothes and gave them back to Glasses Boy, but he insisted on her wearing them. Otherwise, he couldn't even speak to Momo. At that moment, Momo's heart raced because Glasses Boy had just inadvertently quoted her idol Ken. To calm down, she changed the subject and asked what Glasses Boy's real name was. Without thinking, he blurted out, "I'm Ken," stunning Momo completely. A male classmate, who doesn't even have genitals and shares the same name as her idol, shocked Momo on the spot. She inadvertently forgot to use her powers, and Ken transformed into an old lady. Frightened, she quickly threw him out and then made a rule. To stay normal, don't mention his name. She nicknamed him Transcendent Kid. As they walked into town, dawn broke, and pedestrians began to appear. Ken couldn't go home looking like this, so Momo took him to her house, warning him to be cautious because her grandmother is very strict with men. She almost killed her ex-boyfriend once. Before the grandmother could see him, Ken nearly burned to death. Momo hurriedly moved him into the river, remembering that their house is surrounded by a barrier to ward off evil spirits. Ken, cursed as the old lady, couldn't enter. Momo temporarily removed the talisman from the wall, allowing Ken safely through, and he even changed his hairstyle. Momo's house turned out to be a mansion, but luckily her grandmother wasn't home. She went to change clothes in her room. As soon as Ken closed the door, he turned back into the old lady. Momo had to change clothes with the door open, maintaining her powers with one hand. She then found clothes for Ken and asked if he really lost his genitals, as the old lady claimed she took them. Ken checked, and, to his shock, they were gone. Curious, Momo tried to see what it looked like, but Ken refused, causing her to think he was being petty, while Ken was truly devastated. Blaming Momo for taking him to explore haunted places, they began to argue. Momo thought the root of all evil was Ken approaching her, but Ken, feeling low, explained he didn't want to miss the chance to make a friend after sensing her kindness. However, they were from different worlds and ended up in this mess. They would likely part ways after this. Momo was upset by Ken's assumptions and self-conclusions, noting his tendency to push people away. No wonder he had no friends. Softening her stance, Momo suggested they could normally discuss supernatural topics in the future. Suddenly, Ken called her a freak and started blaming her for being inconsiderate. They began to fight until they heard knocking, but it wasn't the sound of Momo's doorbell. Remembering her grandmother mentioning 2 doorbells, one for humans and one for evil spirits, Momo realized evil spirits had come after she removed the talisman. Unable to fight it off, their only option was to reapply the talisman, which would cause the evil spirit to combust. Momo sneaked out the back door and saw no trace of the spirit, but suddenly a wall appeared in front of them, trapping them inside, and both started bleeding, seemingly affected by a distant black mist. Just then, a large face appeared in front of Momo and said, "I've found you." It accused them of breaking their promise and called them bad humans. The giant evil spirit clapped its hands, creating a hurricane that blew away the charm Momo was holding. It then punched Ken into the wall, but fortunately the charm was sturdy enough not to break. Momo and Ken exchanged glances and decided to run. But with a casual wave of its arm, the spirit sent them flying. It stomped the ground heavily and demanded their genitals. Without time to think, they ran first to create distance. Later, Momo asked Ken if he still had a genital. Ken denied it and said it was an alien, identifiable by a ring on its head, known as the Flatwoods Monster, a 3-meter-tall alien. Why does the doorbell set for ghosts also react to aliens? Ken recalled a study suggesting that people who frequently encounter paranormal events also often see UFOs. There might be a connection between ghosts and aliens. As they spoke, the alien began to emit a black mist. If they weren't beaten to death, they would be poisoned. Furthermore, Momo had to suppress Ken's curse and couldn't fully use her powers. Part of Ken's body was rapidly aging. Momo applied her powers, but one hand remained unchanged. Facing the ruins ahead, Ken decided to gamble. He asked Momo to suppress the brain curse while freeing the rest of his body. Just then, the alien's giant face appeared again. Fortunately, they were adept at escaping, although Momo was not yet skilled at controlling this power. She closed her eyes and split Ken's curse into 2, only freeing his body. Ken's eyes turned bright red, and in the next second, he reverted to his rapidly aging form. However, just as the alien attacked again, Ken transformed successfully, dodging the attack while holding Momo and retaining his rationality. He suddenly looked very handsome, even speaking just like Momo's idol. But this Ken seemed to lack survival instinct, walking directly under the alien's foot and getting slapped away. However, the alien was confused and raised its hand, which had fingers cut off at an unbelievable speed, showcasing the power of rapid aging. Momo's hope was reignited. But Ken's handsomeness didn't last long as his body began to fail under the strain, and the alien flung him away. His body and consciousness reverted to normal, explaining that his body could not withstand the power of the curse. Cutting off 5 fingers was already the limit. How can we defeat that guy? At that moment, both fell silent as they noticed the alien's movements resembled sumo wrestling. According to sumo rules, touching the ground with your hands means a loss. So, Ken mustered strength for another transformation and directly attacked the alien's leg, chopping it off. Momo concentrated intensely to suppress the curse, and the alien finally fell, melting as soon as its hand hit the ground. The alien did a front flip, grabbed Momo with one hand, and slammed her into the wall with a powerful punch. Without the suppression of superpowers, Ken's body was about to completely turn into an elderly woman at high speed. Unexpectedly, he quickly recovered. Despite Momo being in such a state, she was unharmed and furiously accused the alien of cheating. She swore never to forgive the deceitful creature. The alien, taken aback by her scolding, struck Momo again with a barrage of punches that hit her body like a storm, deeply denting the wall. Momo was satisfied with the depth of the hole, presuming it was just outside the Torii gate. After saying this, she immediately used her powers to pull Ken into her arms and attached a charm to the gate's pillar. Sure enough, the alien's body began to disintegrate naturally, and the illusion vanished. Momo held Ken tightly, not daring to look, until everything returned to normal. they narrowly escaped death. Just as they relaxed, Ken turned into an elderly woman at high speed again. Momo hurriedly infused him with superpowers. This time, Ken was forced to change his hairstyle, and Momo made a teasing remark before she ran out of energy and fainted. Without the suppression of superpowers, Ken completely turned into an elderly woman at high speed. The grandma who nearly bullied Ken and Momo to death was surprisingly thrashed by Momo's grandmother. After Momo fainted, no one could help Ken suppress the curse, and the grandma took control of his body. Just as she was about to attack Momo, a big sister with a broom on her head appeared, who was Momo's grandmother. The grandma instantly teleported behind her to sneak attack, but ended up burning herself instead. It turned out that Momo's grandmother had anticipated this and had set a trap in advance. Now the grandma was trapped in a circle she couldn't escape from, which was a barrier constructed by Momo's grandmother. By nailing the talismans inside the circle, a barrier is formed inside. Nailing them outside forms a barrier outside. This was why the grandma couldn't attack Momo's grandmother. Frustrated and powerless, the grandma could only make threats, vowing to devour her. However, she was harshly reprimanded by Momo's grandmother like hitting a baseball. Trapped in the circle, the grandma cursed loudly and threatened that if she was killed, the body's owner would also die. Momo's grandmother didn't care, thinking Ken was a scoundrel deceiving her granddaughter and deserved to die. With a final farewell, the grandma screamed sharply, and Momo woke from the nightmare, finding herself in her room. She hurried downstairs, saw her grandmother, and asked if Ken had already gone back. Her grandmother dodged the question, asking if Momo had been to a haunted place. Momo said it was her friend, then asked about Ken again. Her grandmother then revealed she had killed the evil spirit and was still holding a grudge over that past event, mocking Momo for not believing in spirits. At this point, Momo could only kneel and apologize, simply wanting to know Ken's whereabouts. Her grandmother told her to check the temple, and Momo, warning that she wouldn't forgive any harm to Ken, ran off while feeling guilty. Momo had pressured Ken to visit the haunted site, now risking his life. However, when she opened the door, she found Ken eating comfortably inside. Seeing Momo safe, he was relieved. Then, her grandmother appeared, explaining that as long as Ken stayed inside, the curse wouldn't activate. Momo briefly shared their experiences and her newly awakened powers, which her grandmother didn't believe. Instead, she spoke about the grandma, a modern monster that once wreaked havoc nationwide. She had visited that tunnel before and found the spiritual energy too strong, even for her, resembling a bound spirit. The worst had happened. The grandma merged with a bound spirit. Momo's grandmother advised giving up as they were no match for the grandma. But Momo, thinking of her idol who would surely help Ken, decided she must also help Ken. At this point, Grandma could only give her one piece of advice: to play a game of tag with the freeway grandma and lure her outside where her powers would weaken. Even Momo should be able to defeat her. But lacking confidence in herself, Momo asked her grandmother to think of a solution using her unbeatable barrier technique. However, her grandmother's barriers only worked by borrowing the divine power of the land and wouldn't function outside the city. Thus, tag was the only solution, but the one who would have to run wouldn't be Momo, it would be Ken. That made things even more difficult. To suppress the curse, Ken had to carry Momo while running, a real challenge for any nerd. Grandma then taught him the Saitama method of training, telling him to start working hard from now on, young man. Meanwhile, Momo also needed to level up her supernatural powers. Once they both got stronger, Grandma would train them herself. After saying this, the old lady left. Ken and Momo thanked and apologized to each other. Momo went to get Ken a quilt, as he could only sleep there that night. But Ken suddenly stopped her, awkwardly saying he was thirsty. Grandma went back to watching TV in the living room. The news reported that a popular idol actually had an illegitimate child and had lied about their age. Passing by, Momo scoffed at the meaningless news. The next day, Ken and Momo began their training. Now there was a big problem. Ken needed to use the bathroom, but Momo's powers couldn't penetrate walls. If he went, his curse might escape. She had to ask her grandmother for help. Grandma first asked how the curse worked. Momo replied that she could see Ken's aura and could shrink it by holding onto it tightly. This worked on other beings and objects too, moving them by grabbing their aura. Initially, when her powers awakened, They were even stronger. Momo felt like she could turn any imagined scene into reality, making her invincible. But this power quickly weakened. Grandma identified the issue. Momo relied too much on sight and should use her other senses, like touch. Following Grandma's advice, Momo closed her eyes to feel and actually managed to see and touch the aura. But she was still inexperienced, and Ken almost completely controlled his body, nearly bursting to use the bathroom. Despite Momo's objections, he rushed for the toilet, starting a desperate chase that even Grandma suddenly joined. Eventually, Ken safely made it into the bathroom, with Momo holding the door open to suppress the curse. Grandma told Momo that the power she initially felt upon awakening was her true strength, just sealed for unknown reasons. She needed to gradually unlock it through training. As they were discussing this, Ken in the bathroom suddenly transformed into the Freeway Grandma. Grandma seemed paralyzed as it turned out the Freeway Grandma's curse was contagious, spreading through Ken. She could use the curse to kill anyone Ken saw. The Freeway Grandma threatened Momo using Grandma, demanding Momo come to the tunnel that night, or she'd use Ken to kill everyone nearby. After saying this, the Freeway Grandma disappeared, and Ken and Grandma regained their ability to move. But half of the charms were tainted by darkness. Momo told her grandmother about what had just happened, learning they would head to the tunnel tonight. Her grandmother equipped them fully and gave her granddaughter a hug before they left. Despite facing a life or death situation tonight, they still felt awkward because the tunnel was too far away, requiring them to take a tram. Passengers around them were too scared to look, but Momo didn't care anymore, filled with hatred for the Freeway Grandma who dared to harm her dear grandmother. On the tram, Momo changed her clothes because the ones her grandmother prepared were too outdated. She believed a combat outfit should look fabulous. After arriving, Momo tried to use her charms to have Ken lead the way, but he didn't fall for it, and they ended up walking together, feeling more optimistic as they talked. They joked about defeating the Freeway Grandma as easily as they had an alien before. However, when they shone their flashlight, a massive head filled the tunnel, scaring them into running. As they turned around, another head was behind them, both heads moving closer. Momo pulled out a bunch of baseball bats from Ken's backpack and shot them at the head, but it swallowed them with its eyes. With no other choice, they had to unleash Ken's curse. Once transformed, Ken became zombie-like. Momo cheered for him from behind, but he soon reverted back to normal because Momo could no longer see the energy inside him. It turned out the Freeway Grandma had returned the beads to Ken, lifting his curse. Without the power of the curse, they faced two gaping mouths with Momo's powers, unable to cope. Remembering her grandmother's words, she provoked the Freeway Grandma into a race. Surprisingly, reverse psychology worked, and they started a game of tag. The rule was that the Freeway Grandma had to count to 10 minutes before starting to chase them. But she cheated, jumping from 1 minute to 10 and caught Momo with numerous arms. Now it was Ken's turn to be counted for 10 minutes. Furious and helpless, Ken didn't want to always be saved by Momo, so he charged at the Freeway Grandma, biting fiercely and not letting go despite her attempts to shake him off. Realizing the clothes he wore were problematic, the Freeway Grandma re-entered Ken, bursting through the clothes intending to return and consume Momo. Unbeknownst to her, she had fallen into their trap. Now within Ken, Momo could see the energy again. She grabbed it with both hands, also seizing the Freeway Grandma's lifeline. Before the Freeway Grandma could attack in desperation, Momo crushed her. Although not completely destroyed, only a small amount of her power remained sealed within Ken. As the situation reversed, Momo was about to deal with the old lady when suddenly a massive crab appeared in the tunnel, demanding they return the grandma. The Freeway Grandma and the ground spirit had not merged after all. The giant crab was the ground spirit in the tunnel. Ken and Momo, too scared to torment the Freeway Grandma, started running as the giant crab chased behind them. The reason why the spirit took the form of a crab is said to be because the deceased transform into marsh crabs to cross the River of Three Crossings. As Momo explained this, they desperately fled. Unfortunately, the Freeway Grandma was leading the crab right to them. With no other choice, Ken transformed. In the instant the crab's claw came down, Ken, instantly transformed, picked up Momo and rushed out. Now, Momo rode on Ken, who was speeding forward, holding the reins, which were the Freeway Grandma. However, there was a problem. Ken, moving at high speed, couldn't turn properly. They both ended up crashing off a mountain road. At a critical moment, Ken spun his legs like propellers and somehow managed to hover in midair before slowing down and landing on the street. The giant crab followed right after, forcing them to keep running. To the onlookers on the street, it looked like Ken and Momo were merely engaged in a bizarre horseback battle. Running like this wasn't a solution. Ken felt he couldn't keep going much longer, yet they were still a distance from leaving the city. Ken, carrying Momo, rushed into a health center. The giant crab, however, was too destructive, and soon, both, along with the crab, ended up in a hot spring pool. Momo used her powers to burst a water pipe, and the hot water gushed out, submerging the giant crab, effectively cooking the mighty ground spirit. Ken and Momo continued to run towards the outskirts of the city, but then countless citizens chased after them. It turned out that a nearby cemetery had been awakened by the freeway grandma, who possessed the citizens on the street. Now they were caught between the giant crab ahead and ghostly citizens behind. Momo asked Ken to transform again, their last chance. After transforming, Ken carried Momo and dashed out at high speed, with Momo using her powers to help him navigate around obstacles. Facing the blocking crab, Ken jumped right onto it and kicked off, leaping into the air and changing direction dramatically. As his power ran out and the transformation ended, they saw a train from the air. Before they could rejoice, they plummeted down. Fortunately, Momo quickly deployed her psychic wings and Ken used his feet as brakes, allowing them to land just in time. Although Momo missed grabbing the freeway grandma in that instant, the grandma managed to escape Ken's body and then scolded the young duo for their trickery and lack of respect for an elder. Momo retorted, having never seen an elder who so poorly looked after the young. This time, the freeway grandma merged directly with the giant crab. Knowing they were close to leaving the city, the freeway grandma offered them some time to escape. Momo said a second was all she needed because her powers could grab anything. She then swung out a large hand and grabbed the train above because the freeway grandma's speed was only 100 kilometers per hour, while the train's speed was 120 kilometers per hour. They were sure to win the race. But unexpectedly, the freeway grandma lunged and grabbed the rear of the train. Little did they know, Momo had planned this as grandma was waiting ahead. Now, freeway grandma was held in place by Momo's psychic powers. As the streetcar left the city, her enormous form exploded in an instant. In that moment, Momo seemed to see the spirits of many young girls. Now, both freeway grandma and the ground spirit were completely eliminated, and the curse on Ken was fully lifted. Grandma had not intended to use such a violent method. Afterwards, the three of them went to the tunnel to pay their respects. Many girls had been abused and dismembered, their remains discarded here, turning into malevolent spirits. Mediums had been tracking freeway grandma for a long time, finding that wherever she appeared, there were always spirits of dead girls. Perhaps she was just comforting those who couldn't attain enlightenment. Unfortunately, they ultimately lashed out at the living, and thus they had to be sent on to the next life. Of course, the living must also never disrespect the dead. If one trespasses in their domain, death is an inevitable consequence. Fortunately, this time did not lead to any major disaster. Momo and Grandma still joyfully made a crab hot pot, but Ken had no appetite. Regardless, he was still very grateful to the grandmother and granddaughter for helping him retrieve his ox. When Grandma became curious about whether Ken's ox had truly returned, Ken was so frightened that he quickly ran away. It was also time for him to leave this strange family. As he was about to go, he suddenly felt a sense of loss. Would he and Momo become strangers again tomorrow? Unexpectedly, Momo called out to him, turning their goodbye into "see you tomorrow." Ken, who had finally found his missing genitals, was shocked to discover that only half was left. Early in the morning, Ken was sneaking around the school, practicing how to greet Momo later. Unexpectedly, Momo was standing at the school gate. Hope sprang in Ken's heart. Was she waiting for him? Trying not to get his hopes up, he thought she must be waiting for someone else and walked past her, ignoring her. Momo got annoyed and kicked him. That's when Ken realized that she was indeed waiting for him. As they walked to the classroom, they chatted about aliens and felt reluctant to part at the door. Just after saying goodbye to Momo, Ken was bumped into the classroom by a classmate and scorned by another girl. However, he wasn't discouraged because he had made a great friend in Momo. Meanwhile, Momo was daydreaming, and her trendy friends guessed she had missed school the previous day to win back an ex-boyfriend. Obviously, her attempt had failed. She must have smashed her phone in frustration, since she hadn't replied to their messages. Seeing Momo's gloomy face, they were even more convinced of their theory. In reality, Momo just wanted to continue discussing aliens with Ken. Ken, uninterested in studying, only wanted to chat about ghosts. Both were deeply preoccupied with each other, and school felt like dragging through the days until lunch break. The hallway was crowded, and both Ken and Momo, eager to find each other, missed each other perfectly. Momo asked Ken's classmates where he was, but they had no clue about him. They figured he might be in the student cafeteria during lunch break. Momo thought Ken wouldn't go to such a noisy place and searched for him in the store instead, while Ken went to the cafeteria. They missed each other again. Later, Ken visited the store and Momo the cafeteria, only to end up sitting despondently on benches, not far from each other. They missed each other because they always looked up just as the other looked down. As lunch break was ending, both felt the other was avoiding them. Ken, already feeling inferior, thought Momo didn't consider him a friend. Both stood up feeling gloomy and bumped into each other accidentally, even chipping their teeth. However, they didn't mind the minor accident and were busy asking each other where they had been. Ken quickly explained he had been looking for Momo all along. Only then did they realize they had both been searching for each other, making the atmosphere awkward. Just as they tried to find a new topic, two of Momo's trendy friends interrupted. They had just witnessed Ken and Momo kissing and naturally assumed they were dating. Momo, embarrassed by being caught, instinctively denied it, saying she couldn't possibly kiss someone like Ken, who retorted. The two, who had just been bubbly now, began arguing fiercely. The trendy friends watched the drama, covering their mouths, until the two left angrily. They then unanimously remarked how great Ken and Momo's relationship seemed. Ken first went to the bathroom. He had just impulsively responded in the heat of the moment and did not actually dislike Momo. So, he thought it would be best to apologize later. However, he realized a big problem. Meanwhile, Momo returned to the classroom and was grilled by her friends. They even told others that Momo was dating a geek. Just as they were discussing this, Ken came looking for her. Momo, feeling embarrassed, did not want to talk to him. Ken kept insisting he had something important to tell her, but she maintained her attitude. Her friends began to feel that Momo was treating her boyfriend too harshly. This made Momo even less inclined to face Ken, despite his explanations and his pitiful tone, saying he really wanted to talk to her. The trendy girls got excited again, and Ken finally left dejectedly, leaving behind the words, "Is getting along with me that embarrassing?" Even the onlookers felt sorry for him, and Momo was filled with guilt. After school, Ken went home alone and accidentally bumped into a pink-haired beauty who was surprisingly friendly and even touched his arm to see if he was hurt. Ken was unaccustomed to such treatment, which made the pink-haired girl act even more gently. Momo then saw them chatting happily. "What's going on here?" Ken said he had no friends, she thought. The pink-haired girl walked past Momo with her friends, mocking how stupid the geek looked after being flirted with. It turns out she enjoyed seeing the dumbstruck look on a geek's face after flirting with him. Thinking no other cute girl would bother with Ken again, Momo used her powers to hit her on the head with a water basin. Ken was about to check on her when Momo took his arm and smiled, inviting him to walk home together. She purposely complimented Ken to annoy the pink-haired girl, saying, "No stupid woman could appreciate your charm." On their way home, Momo sincerely apologized to Ken, explaining that she felt embarrassed by her friend's mockery and did not think poorly of being seen with him. Ken was happy to reconcile with Momo. Then he remembered the big problem. They had defeated the speedy grandma, but only half of his genitals had returned. Only the stick was left, missing 2 balls. Momo laughed it off while Ken was the only one troubled by this. Grandma took a mirror to look at him and noticed something was amiss. She asked Momo to bring a doll and a basin. Ken placed his feet in the basin while Momo attached a charm to the doll. Grandma then began to fan Ken vigorously, asking Momo if she saw anything. Surprisingly, there was a moment when the energy inside Ken changed color. Grandma instructed her to pull out the energy at that moment. Momo's control over her powers grew even stronger, and she managed to pull it out successfully. The energy is now trapped in the doll, and Grandma is fervently fanning a maneki neko. The maneki neko fled into a small room, but was still sensed and captured by Momo. Upon checking, the maneki neko was indeed pinned to the ground. cursing in Speedy Grandma's voice. It turns out that during the moment of being burned by the barrier spell, Speedy Grandma turned into a spirit and swam through the flames, returning to Ken's body. She was barely alive, which perfectly concealed her presence. She had planned to recuperate inside Ken, but was discovered sooner than expected. Now, she is just a maneki neko, rolling and throwing tantrums on the ground. Ken also demands his balls back using a charm. Speedy Grandma, looking smug, isn't afraid of them taking action. If she dies, Ken's balls will never return. She even threatens Ken to kill Momo and her grandma with a kitchen knife, and then return his balls. But as soon as she finishes speaking, Ken suddenly transforms. Speedy Grandma is stunned. Only Grandma understands what happened. She had fanned Speedy Grandma out of Ken's body, but Speedy Grandma clung desperately to him, so only her consciousness left. Her spiritual power remained inside Ken. Only Grandma can put Speedy Grandma's consciousness back. Now, control is back with them. The maneki neko is sweating profusely, and then gets fanned vigorously by Grandma. Ken returns to normal. Eventually, Momo pleads for Speedy Grandma, not really hating her, as they all sympathize with the girl spirits bound to the earth. Momo states that as long as Speedy Grandma returns the balls, they will restore her powers. Finally, Speedy Grandma agrees, but now the problem is she accidentally lost Ken's balls.